you trust anyone, mon général?
Never accept, always question.
Hello, greater YouTube area and the surrounding internet regions. This is Killer Cardinal DA7. So in addition to analyses on politics, ethics, morality, philosophy, and any other issues in society that we all struggle with, I also want to do videos on gaming. Video games have been my favorite pastime since I was little, and I want to use this platform to share my thoughts about the gaming community and the industry, hopefully to incite conversation and deeper thought about gaming overall, though I imagine saying anything positive about the Order 1886 is more likely to incite anger than deep thought. Let me summarize right up front. This game is only $10 to $15 right now. It may not have deserved the $60 price point at launch, but compared to other $10 to $15 games, the disparity in the production value compared to other games at price is pretty undeniable. Granted, not every game with pretty graphics and good motion capture is great because of those two things alone. Games should be compared to others at the same price point. That's absolutely fair, and while this one may not measure up at full price, at much less, it's completely worth it. Even though this game is almost 2 years old, its flaws still ring true in many games coming out this week, this month, and this year, and those flaws should always be called out. Games should always be reviewed as close to launch as possible to give consumers a healthy idea of whether or not those games are worth investing full price immediately. However, I do feel that when games come out and get a lot of attention, whether good or bad, and deserved or not, they run the risk of getting turned into foregone conclusions, and every time they're mentioned in discussion from then on, those foregone conclusions just get set deeper into stone regardless of how those conclusions change over time. That being said, I want to spend a significant part of this video spotlighting the negatives many people have been hung up on. I do like this game a lot, but it does have plenty of fair negatives. I want to both highlight why those criticisms are fair, but I also want to explain why some of those areas aren't deal breakers, at least not for me. Some of these things may be higher or lower priority for you, but I'm mentioning them in no particular order as part of the bigger picture. First up, one of the more nagging features, the QTE segments and application. Huge point of contention for a lot of people. Personally, I like QTEs in shooters that have as solid gunplay as this game has. It presents another type of button challenge than just aiming and shooting. In gun combat games, obviously the running, gunning, and shooting should be the most fun part, but your reflexes and reactions shouldn't only be attached to your trigger. And to the Order's credit, some segments, like the Elder Lycan fights, attempt to make its QTEs a bit more dynamic, like the way you can choose different striking types, but those striking types don't make any major difference in the fight, so this attempt doesn't go nearly far enough to stand out from other games' use of the mechanic. Thus, it's understandable why most people see this game's QTEs as the same as all others. Not to mention, many QTEs in this game aren't necessary, they don't add anything exciting or different or tense to your experience, and they put QTEs into cutscenes that you have to do correctly, leaving you unable to progress to the next stage if you don't do them right. It's archaic, definitely annoying, and a huge negative. Not enough for me to hate the entire game, but I can't ignore that it's a bad point. It can really help break immersion when you fail a cutscene enough times or stumble through contextual stealth sections and you can't recover. Next, the lack of activities and content besides the narrative. I've played plenty of narrative-based action shooter games, Uncharted and Max Payne being two of my favorites of all time, neither of which have much in terms of single-player side activities, XP, leveling, skill trees, progression, currency, or unlocks. Uncharted a little more than Max Payne 1 and 2. Max Payne 3 had a bit more if I recall, but even those are mostly bonus stuff like skins, alternative modes, behind-the-scenes things, stuff that only people who are obsessed with the game might go after with any real vigor, which causes one to speculate, and this may be entirely false, I don't know the behind-the-scenes story, but it's possible that Ready at Dawn figured those kind of things weren't entirely necessary. Think about it, almost every game these days has a progression system and currency and unlocks. It's not like adding those features is a major selling point that moves millions of units just for their presence. Quite the opposite in some cases. Games have tried to force a progression system or unlocking skill trees into a game, and they get criticized for not being deep enough, or swinging balance unfairly, or even encouraging microtransactions because players don't feel like grinding or farming to unlock things they want. Sometimes progression systems can be more of a pain than a plus, and occasionally be a crutch for developers to keep players engaged with steady unlocks, only to watch them get bored when those players have nothing else to unlock, or they unlock everything after only a few hours of play. In addition, look at a company like Ubisoft and the state of most MMOs out there, touting huge open worlds full of activities, most of which get criticized for not being compelling or interesting enough. Ready at Dawn could have put some easy bounty hunting mode in the game, or some random trick shooting challenge mode where you earn British pounds to buy more tools and gadgets from Nikola Tesla, but would that really have made the game worth $60? I'm thinking probably not. That all being said, is a standard of most games, for this one to not have a little more stuff to unlock or progress through or activities to engage in does hurt the game's longevity. More activities or missions or goals might not be a selling point, but enough other games have them standing, so here they're conspicuous by their absence. For all the criticism games like Destiny have gotten for their crummy handling of story and lore, Destiny could at least keep people coming back to tinker with builds and farm gear, not the loot cave. They changed that. The Order 1886 doesn't have anything like that, and it's no wonder people dismissed it for not being worth it. Another point to raise, mind you, a little more abstract and harder to quantify, the misleading advertising about the uniqueness of the concept. A trailer from E3 2013 that I've linked in the description shows a game with finely dressed soldiers in Victorian-era London, some referring to each other by the names of King Arthur's knights, wielding almost steampunk-style weapons, standing off against supernatural creatures. Viewers' imaginations lit up with the possibilities of what the game could lead to. The fantastic first-person shooter Metro coming to mind as a possible frame of reference about what it would be like to engage in combat with these werewolf-like things. And hey, if there's werewolves, why not vampires? Other undead creatures. Knights of the Round Table meets Van Helsing, that sounds like an amazing combo. This universe was so open for interpretation, and not to spoil it too much, but the story wraps up much more personal for the main character than globally, and most of the global implications are either taken care of too quickly, or just not dealt with enough. The ending does leave room open for a cool way to continue things differently down the road, but it does end really abruptly. Short games can be really powerful, but short also means far less time is available to expand on anything or get players invested. Granted, the name of the game is The Order 1886, so for the focus to be on the internal relationships within that order, I get that much. People criticize this game for its lengthy cutscenes and how it takes players out of interacting with the world, but many of those cutscenes feature discussions that don't have many ways to interact. And they do world build about how this order functions, if no other way than by illustrating the rigid procedure and ritual they follow. It's still valuable information. Now you might say, well, why no dialogue options? Why not have branching paths in the story, multiple endings? All fair questions. For me, I don't think all games need those things. Offering storyline options to players is usually fun and all, but many of us have played tons of games where developers try to offer branching paths and multiple endings and ended up being wasted effort because they didn't go far enough, or the ending wasn't affected enough by a player's choices, or the end wasn't personal enough to a player's exact experience, or simply the journey didn't go the way a player thinks it should have. Sometimes I'd rather just have a distinct narrative and analyze what happens in it than be given an illusion of choice that pays off really poorly or not at all. I like the story in The Order 1886, but I can acknowledge how people have been turned off by what exactly happens and feeling additionally jilted by not having any choice in the matter. So how about multiplayer? That's usually the saving grace of a game that gets reviewed badly from a single-player perspective, right? Well, GameSpot put out an article shortly before the game was released talking about how the developers tweeted that the game wouldn't have multiplayer. I encourage every gamer to educate themselves on everything they can find out about games they're looking forward to playing, especially ones they pre-order. I want to join the mass pre-order boycott many of my favorite YouTube personalities advocate. I'm definitely trying to rein myself in on that front, but even though gamers should get all the info they can before putting their money down, there's got to be people who kept up with all the info on this game and still might have missed one or more announcements about that feature not being present, especially in tweet form, even with a widely seen online site like GameSpot talking about it. Plus, for all the criticism games like Call of Duty and Battlefield get for having mostly limp or forgettable storylines, outside of a few worthy exceptions, I'll admit, there were one or two gems in those franchises story-wise, most people who play those types of games do so for the multiplayer component, and they get hundreds, if not thousands, of hours out of it. The Order 1886 is completely narrative-focused, so again, one can speculate, and again, could very well be false, that Ready at Dawn maybe didn't want to bother with flimsy multiplayer modes like Horde or Wave modes, or some lazy team deathmatch PvP because they wouldn't have been game-changing or interesting. It's possible, it's not probable. And even if that explanation is probable, it isn't convincing or consumer-friendly. People do often look at a simple number of hours a game offers and assign an overall value to that game based on that duration, and sometimes it's a bit unfair. However, when you compare two full-price games, one with a short campaign and no side activities or multiplayer, and another with a focus on multiplayer offering hundreds of thousands of hours, the disparity in value is usually obvious. While I don't get that same amount of time out of PvP-centered games, I acknowledge that many people see it differently from me. Finally, there's the biggest offense, one I've already implied, but to address it formally, the length and the resulting price tag. This game came with a full AAA price tag of $60 minimum at launch, more if you got the collector's edition. As I said, multiplayer games can offer thousands of hours of play, but most multiplayer games benefit from the unpredictability of what players you'll play with, the unexpected experiences, and the crazy moments you'll have. That's standard for most multiplayer games, even the ones with allegedly toxic communities. In terms of development, publishers must love the idea of encouraging multiplayer environments as they require much less effort on their part. The players get to be the stars, and all the people in charge have to do is create a little playground the developers tweak if really needed, or if enough of a stink is made, as opposed to having to pay top dollar for high-quality writers and voice actors and story directors and character directors and world artists and designers, etc., 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 etc. Begs an interesting question. Which is worth paying for more? A game where the developers work far less, but the players spend more time playing? Or a game where the production values are extremely high, but one that players get very little actual game time with? Again, on the surface, it seems obvious to go with the former over the latter. I like the story in New Order 1886 a lot, enough to play it through twice, and I do look forward to playing it through fully a third time outside of this little bit of footage I recorded. But that leads me to my biggest point about value. I paid $10 for my digital copy on a flash sale, and that was at least a year ago. Last time I was in GameStop, a used copy was on the shelf for about $15. From a consumer standpoint, paying $60 for a 4-hour campaign and no other continued activities, that is unquestionably a ripoff. As much as I do like this game and the universe created for it, I can't deny that for a second. $10 to $15 for this level of production value, though, way more worth it. It has glaring flaws in its approach, I can't deny that. In fact, I pretty much did the opposite of deny it. I stated most of those problems earlier. Still, what the developers and designers have created, the atmosphere bleeds through the screen via factors that are typically overlooked as worth mentioning unless they really suck. The dialogue, while not interactive, is strong and captures each character perfectly. The music is beautifully suited for the world and sets the dark tone of the game. The voice acting is punchy, emotional, and expresses exactly where each character is in the storyline. And the exact narrative events, while short and understandably easy to miss, show characters changing motivations believably during the journey. These factors are extremely well done here, but I feel like they don't matter as a selling point as much as they should. They may not be worth $60, but hell, $10 to $15 is less than some movie tickets these days. Even if you look at this game as mostly non-interactive, would you rather pay $10 to $15 for some slapdash, by-the-numbers Hollywood action flick, likely rehashed from a franchise that already exists, or an experience that's twice as long that you can at least play a little way through? Writing and voice acting may not be a deal breaker in Call of Duty or Battlefield where most people buy them for the multiplayer interactions, but in a narrative-driven game, they should carry more weight than they do. You can take each character and their individual decisions with a grain of salt, but even though the game is short, they pack a decent amount of movement and events. Characters rise, fall, meet, change, die. There are single-player games out there that can last 60 to 100 hours or more that don't have a fraction of the attitude change that some of these games' characters have. Their motivations, loyalties, and values all mesh differently, up to and including the 3 major female characters, all of whom stood among their male counterparts as integral, important, and equal. Maybe not in number or screen time, but in the impact, emotion, and power they brought to the story. Also, for hardcore PS4 fans, this game is exclusive. It's not on PC or Xbox, it's just on PS4. Admittedly, when you put this game up against other much larger, deeper PlayStation exclusives like Horizon Zero Dawn, Bloodborne, The Last of Us, Until Dawn, games with way more to offer, I can fully agree. The Order 1886 may not seem like a lot to sneeze at. Those games deserve their full price cost because of what they provide players, and even if they're not in the thousands of hours category, the hours they do provide are phenomenal. This game may not do enough to deserve 60, but at $10-15, this game at least ends up being an extra feather in your Sony cap. Compared to an Xbox exclusive like Gears of War, 5 games released in its franchise, and to its credit, according to Wikipedia, it sold 22 million copies and made over $1 billion as of January 2014. Not bad at all, though it has helped make the third-person cover-based shooter into something of a cliche genre, to the point where, despite these 2 games sharing nothing conceptually, some online have referred to this game as Gears of War 1886. I haven't played any of the Gears of War games, though Gears of War is available through the Play Anywhere service on PC, so believe it or not, even though I'm PlayStation Blue, I am genuinely considering getting Gears of War through my PC, or if not that, then some other Xbox titles. If they make Halo Master Chief Collection or Sunset Overdrive available through PC, let me know. But this all being said, in my view, I don't think every Gears game could have been worth full price along the way. There had to have been one where it was like, okay, you're pushing this a little farther than it needs to go now. The Order 1886 is at least unique in concept, even if its features or offerings do fall flat or aren't executed as well as they could have been. Look, I'm not trying to position the Order 1886 the greatest game ever made, not even a great game on its own, but it can still have a position among PS4 players' libraries. I want my voice to join others pushing the industry into more consumer-friendly practices, and I don't think saying this game is worth it after its prices come down considerably is turning my back on the revolution against the AAA wallet gouge. Quite the opposite. Waiting for the price to come down is exactly what big publishers don't want you to do. They want you to jump immediately. They want you to get pumped for a game enough that you'll throw your money at them before they provided any reason for you to do so. When games like this go under the radar due to bad reception, the price ultimately goes down to help it sell more, though by then, people often forget why it's worth anything at all and just don't bother. They see it on the shelf or in the digital store, they chuckle to themselves for a minute, and then they move right along. If you pass on this game initially due to the bad press, the negative reviews, and the community backlash, like I said, I completely get it. Passing on a $60 game that has this much negativity surrounding it is smart consumer behavior. But if you did pass on it when it was full price, think about picking it up and giving it a shot now. Even if you hate it by the ending, for only 10 to 15 bucks, you're barely losing out on anything. At this price, it's definitely worth it. I'm Killer Cardinal DA7, reminding you to use your head, be nice to each other, and take the time to think. Talk to you later.
I'll take that as a yes.